Good morning and welcome to SageMaker Fridays. I'm Michelle Monclova. I'm the product manager for SageMaker Studio Lab. And today I'm joined by Mia Chang, my esteemed colleague, who is a data science specialist and a solution architect with Amazon Web Services. Now, today we have a little something for everybody. If you're brand new to machine learning, great. We're going to show you how to get started and start your journey. And if you are brand new to SageMaker Studio Lab, we have another great treat for you, which is we're going to help you get an account today and get access today. And if you're familiar with SageMaker and Studio Lab already, then you're in for a special treat, which is we're going to show you how to start with a model in SageMaker Studio Lab and then deploy that model using SageMaker with our serverless inference service. So like I said, a little bit of something for everybody. And at the end, we will be taking questions. So with no further ado, let's get going. So we have a couple of slides just to get us started. Like I mentioned, if you're brand new to SageMaker Studio Lab, please go to this URL now, studiolab.sagemaker.aws, and you will want to click the upper right-hand corner, which says sign up or request an account. So once you request an account, you will be able to fill in the usual information like your email, your name, your company, your country. But at the very bottom, you'll see a spot for a referral code. If you're watching this event live on Friday, July 29th, between this time zone of 9 and 11 Pacific Coast time, you will be able to use this referral code to get immediate access to our environment. And that referral code is capital S, capital M, capital F for Friday. So SM Friday -8, D as in dog, 0, F as in Frank, 0. So you don't have to write that code down just yet, but please get started doing that so you can follow along with the rest of the demo. Now, next slide, while you're requesting that account, you will get an email asking you to verify your email address. Do that and continue to create your account. I'm keeping the referral code up in the upper right-hand corner so you can refer to it when you get to that stage. I haven't taken it away just yet.
One question, Michelle.
Yes.
So what if I watch this session and it's not streaming? So probably this referral code is outdated. What can I do when I register it?
Great question. Thank you. So if you are not watching this live, that referral code will not be good for you. So leave it blank and you will request an account and you will get an approval for that account within a few business days. So that's a great question. As well as if you are someone who actually teaches classes and you want your participants to use SageMaker Studio Lab, you can talk to your AWS representative and we can actually issue you your own referral code that you can give to your own participants so they can get immediate access to the system as well. So thanks, and keep on butting in with those questions because I forgot to mention that, Mia. So while everyone is registering, let me just do a quick overview about what SageMaker Studio Lab is. This is an environment that we designed for people to start their ML journey or to do some experimentation with data science and Python code. It is for coders. This is completely free. There's no credit card required, nor is there an AWS account. It's based upon the open source Jupyter Lab 3 environment. And you don't have to worry about setting up any sort of cloud infrastructure because we take care of all that for you. For every time you use SageMaker Studio Lab, you log in and you use a user session. And in that user session, you're able to select either CPU compute or GPU. If you select CPU, your user session will last as much as 12 hours or until you stop it. If you're using GPU, which is a much more powerful and much more expensive compute type, we will give you the user session for 4 hours at a time. When your user session ends, your work will automatically be saved, and you can start another user session immediately. We do have an additional limit on GPU for just 8 hours total per 24-hour period. We also, with SageMaker Studio Lab, we offer you persistent storage up to 15 gigs. That way, when you are working in your environment, everything gets saved, your environment gets saved, and when your user session starts up again the next day or later on that day, you're picking up where you left off. There's no need to pip install everything all over again. Your environment's exactly the way you left it. We have integration to Git, which will allow you some good code versioning, open source code versioning tools, as well as we're integrated to GitHub, so you have the ability to share your environment with your community. And we also give you some powerful terminal access as well. Mia, did I leave anything out?
Oh, good.
Okay. So this is my final slide, I promise, and then we will get right into the environment. Again, for those who are here live, you will see that referral code in the upper right-hand corner. If you want to write that down at this point, you should, because after this slide, we're going to get right into the demo. I want to spend a couple of minutes, though, talking about SageMaker Studio Lab and where it fits into our entire ecosystem. So since this is SageMaker Friday, I'm going to assume most of you have heard about what SageMaker is already. And as you know, SageMaker is the platform that manages your entire machine learning lifecycle, from preparing your data, to building your model, to training and fine-tuning your model, to deploying, as well as managing and monitoring your models as well. So we have something called SageMaker Studio, which is your integrated development environment, or your IDE, that is basically the portal to all of those services inside SageMaker. That's SageMaker Studio. SageMaker Studio Lab sits outside of all of that. You don't need an AWS account, and you don't need a credit card like I mentioned earlier, and it's a great place for you to get started with your machine learning journey. You can do a lot of experimentation in Studio Lab. Now, the reason why I bring all this up is because we're going to give you a quick run through of what SageMaker Studio Lab is. If you want a deeper dive of just really seeing the capabilities of Studio Lab, you can look for another video that we did at reInvent in December 2022. Look for that video and we can do a much deeper dive of all the different features of Studio Lab. But in today's demo, we'll do a quick overview, and then we're going to show you how to take a model that you've trained in this experimental environment, this lab, and deploy it using serverless inference. And that's why I made this one yellow here. Serverless inference, if you haven't heard yet, it's a way of deploying your model in a way where you're not constantly leveraging compute. You only use a compute when the model is called on. So it's a very economical way for people to deploy models that aren't constantly needed. And it's a bring your own model. So the model that we create in SageMaker Studio Lab, we're going to show how to just bring it and deploy it in SageMaker. Now, Mia, keep me honest. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think in this part from the left-hand side, as you mentioned, the Studio Lab 1 is a free service for everyone to run experimental projects. And if you look for something on production that you're thinking to move to Amazon SageMaker, I think that would be our key message here.
Great. So let me get going. So here is, if you go to the URL, like I mentioned, studiolab.sagemaker.aws, hopefully most of you have already done this. Hopefully most of you have already requested that free account and you've used that referral code. Again, if you haven't, if you're seeing this, a recording of this, leave the referral code blank and we will approve your account in a few days. I am not going to request an account because I already have one. I'm just going to log in and give you a quick tutorial or a quick tour of SageMaker Studio Lab itself. So we call this page, after you log in, the project page. And you can see from my project right now that it's not running. It has stopped. So I'm going to show you how to start one with either CPU or GPU. If I select GPU, I will get that notification that this is only, your user sessions will only be good for 4 hours, and you'll be able to have it for 8 hours. So we really recommend people use GPU only when they're getting ready to kick off a intense training job. If you're just writing some code and you're testing some things out, please use CPU because it's cheaper, it's more available, and you're being kinder to the community, so we can reserve our resources for people who really want to do the heavy-duty training work. I'm going to select CPU because I'm just doing a quick demo, and I will start a runtime. So right now, the system's going to go and grab some compute for me and get my environment ready. It takes about 20 to 30 seconds. While it does that, let me go ahead and show you some other assets that belong here, that are here on the project page. If you are brand new to machine learning, we recommend you start off with AWS Machine Learning University. You can click and open up their notebooks and get going immediately. It comes complete with videos and tutorials and code snippets. And frankly, it's the way I started my machine learning career. It was a great start for me. After you've completed that, you can move over to dive into deep learning and learn how to use it. In these particular courses, a little more intense, and you might need GPU for most of them because you're doing some deep learning models that are more computationally heavy. If you scroll down, you'll see here we've got links to one of our partners called Hugging Face. In our demo, we're actually going to show you how to take a Hugging Face model and deploy it in our serverless inference. So more on that in a second. We also have links to some blogs. We ran a hackathon. We've left the link here on our hackathon. Please browse the projects that won. They're pretty inspirational of what people have done on computer vision models to detect flooding zones, fire zones that help people get information out to disaster areas quickly. It's pretty inspirational types of projects you can do all in a free Studio Lab environment. If you want some help, we have 2 social areas that we monitor closely. One is on GitHub and one's on Stack Overflow. And finally, we have the FAQ that I encourage everyone to read so you understand our acceptable use policies, as well as our documentation called the user guide. Okay, so while I was talking, of course, my environment's up and running, but let me show you the Hugging Face model, because there's one more thing I want to show you here, and that is a SageMaker Studio Labs preview mode. So if you're out there writing your own code and you're putting it on GitHub or you're hosting it someplace, you can put an Open in SageMaker Studio Lab button on your notebook and have customers be able to see it in preview mode. You can see things in preview without even having a Studio Lab account, and most people actually do. Right here, I've pulled a quick tour of Hugging Face directly from GitHub. And this is not an environment where I can run things, but I can definitely take a look at their code. Okay. And if I see the code and it's something that I want to use, I can just quickly go ahead and copy it to my project, which just happens to be running right now. And once I copy it to my project, I can choose to copy the entire repo or just a notebook. Just to be fast, I'm going to replace it because I did this before, so I'm replacing what I've already copied. And I'm just going to show you how I quickly took that notebook from GitHub from preview, and I'm now looking at it in SageMaker Studio Lab, and I can actually start running it from here. Now, if you're brand new to SageMaker Studio Lab, there is this neat Getting Started notebook, which I encourage you to walk through to see how to do some basics if you're not familiar with Jupyter Lab 3. And I told you before, you can open up new windows for like, here I'm opening up a new window. I can pick a terminal access. I can write more code, the notebook like this, or we can pick some notebooks from any kind of code bank, whether it be GitHub or some other repository, and just use those like I did over here for Hugging Face. And like I mentioned earlier, if I want to stop my environment, which I will, if I stop my runtime and I restart it, I will pick up exactly where I left off. So there's no need to restart each time you start a new user session. Okay, Mia, keep me honest. Is there anything else I've left out for just a basic overview?
From the basic overview one, for me, I personally really like the opening Studio Lab button because that's really helpful when you put your sample code online and other people can actually try it out in this environment. So I would definitely want to find it out again.
Great. Well, what I would like to do now is I feel like I've introduced the group. I got people started on getting an account. I've given a quick overview of what Jupyter Lab 3 looks like in Studio Lab. Now I want to move the demo over to the really fun part, which is showing how to take a Hugging Face model in Studio Lab and deploy it in SageMaker Serverless Inference. Mia, do you want to take over the screen and do that?
Yeah, sure. From my side, I will share my screen. Okay, so now I assume everyone already can see my screen sharing. It should be a notebook that's saying deploy the Hugging Face pre-trained model to Amazon SageMaker Serverless endpoint for the 3. So for the code sample that I shared today, you can find it in our Studio Lab examples GitHub repository, and you can just git clone the repository and start running this notebook. And in this notebook, what I would like to share with you is following up what Michelle is just mentioning. Like first, if you are new to the Studio Lab, you probably will try out some tutorials, some sample notebooks as your first project. And later on, you probably tried out a few samples. You feel like, hey, this model is super cool that I want to deploy it as a service so that other people can use it. But with the limitation that we have, we are thinking, hey, where we can put our model and share with our friends or colleagues or other people like 24/7. So the idea would be deploy your current model to Amazon SageMaker endpoint. And the endpoint that I choose today is the serverless one. So for the serverless endpoint would be the most cost-effective one because it only charge when you run the model and predict it in. If during the weekday, probably the model traffic is not so huge, it's not even running at all. It only runs when you got the request and when you do the prediction. So for this notebook, I will walk you through the 7 parts. The first part is introduce which model that we are using in the sample. Another one is go through what are the prerequisites for starting this setup by creating an AWS user and Amazon SageMaker execution role. And with this tool prerequisition, then you'll be able to connect your SageMaker client using the Boto 3. So Boto 3 is our Python SDK that you can start a client for a SageMaker so that you can interact with the SageMaker using your Python code. Once we connect the AWS resource, which is the SageMaker one, then we will need to create a model, create an endpoint, and then we are going to play with the endpoint and to test it out, what's the prediction will look like. And in the end, you can also delete the model endpoint if you're not using it. So in general, if it shows in like picture, it will be look like this one. As I mentioned, first, we need to find out which model we are going to work on, create a model. And later on, we are going to set up some configuration to say, hey, this is the setup I want to have in our inference setup, inference endpoint. And we are going to deploy the model as an endpoint, and then we are going to use Boto3 invoke endpoint API to interact with our model to get the prediction out of it.
Yeah, so let me just, before you get going, let me just do a quick confirmation and summary here, which is we're in the free environment Studio Lab. And now we're saying we want to deploy this. The first thing we want to do is we want to connect to our AWS account. So we are going to be using the AWS CLI to connect to our AWS account because we will need to deploy in our AWS account. We are stepping outside of the Studio Lab environment to do that. But it shows the power of how all the experiments that we've done in Studio Lab, how we can take that experiment and then actually deploy it.
Sure. Yeah, so that's the idea for this demo, is to sharing you how you can actually use the SageMaker within the Studio Lab. So the Studio Lab is the one that you create for the free experimental project, and the SageMaker serverless endpoint, this one is the one that you can assure your model as a model inference with a broader audience, and you can serve it as a service. And also you can use a more SageMaker features that Michelle just shared earlier in the slide. So let's jump into introduce the model. So for the model here, I would like to share the first is the framework that we're using is the Hugging Face one. So Hugging Face, if you already heard of it, it's a community for the data science people where you can share your build model and trend model. So you can see the several models here, data set here, and several things you can discuss in this community. And one model we are going to use today is called Digital Bird-based uncased fine-tuned English model. So for this model, it's for English use case for text classification. And in this classification, we are going to identify, is it a positive emotion sentence or a negative emotion sentence? And for this model, if you want to read more, feel free to click the link and it will lead you to the detail page for this transformers model. And it also leads you to the original paper if you want to dive deep on the machine learning and also mathematics part. So from this part, I would like to share you first, we encourage you to start using this percent mark when you are doing the pip install for a better environment management in the Studio Lab. And the second one is after you installed it, then you can start to run it with first initiate a tokenizer, and the second one to say, hey, this is the model that I'm going to load, and it's from the pre-trained model. The model is called this name. And then you can start a text classification pipeline. Say, hey, this is the model that I'm using. This is the tokenizer that I'm using. And then you tested it with the sample sentence that say, I love Amazon SageMaker Studio Lab. And then it says, mostly probably it's a positive sentence. And then it also shows the negative information here. So you can have a comparison to know, hey, how much percentage that it shows is a positive sentence, and another one is how much percentage is a negative sentence. And then you can get a summary, say, hey, this sentence is a positive sentence. So if you want to play more about it, you can definitely run through the code, run through with more samples. And also you can visit their webpage, which you can go through a lot of details regarding like a different framework that you can try it out, different samples that you can try it out on their webpage.
Yeah, and just to add some color to that, Hugging Face has got over maybe 15,000 models now. So we picked a simple one just to kind of, give a sense of categorizing some language. It's mostly natural language models, and their model zoo grows bigger every single day. So we're just picking one example to illustrate this process.
Exactly. So if you're interested in other language like French, German, or Spanish, and so on, you can also find the model and then filter it by the language that you want to run with, and then try it out with the different language case that you have. So The next step, I would like to jump into the prerequisite one. In this part, I would ask you to first have a look if you already have the AWS user login. So when you create an AWS user, that for each of the user, you can get a credential. Each of the credential that you can replace your credentials here with access key ID and also secret access key. So you can save it as a local credential files and configuration file so that you can log in with the CLI. However, you can also use another way is to declare is a local environment and then also share it using Berto3 login with access key and secret key as well. So both way you can run it with the login here. I will not run through the cell because I run the cell before starting the session so that you will not see my secret and also the access key here. I will straight away jump to the SageMaker execution role.
Yes, and Mia, before you do, I know you took some pains to make sure you weren't exposing your credentials out on the World Wide Web. We just want to make
Sure.
sure we emphasize that point, which is the AWS CLI is very powerful. You're able to put your account credentials in your notebooks. Please don't share that up, especially since it's private to you. You want to protect yourself. Please do not put your credentials in open text. She gave you two ways of protecting yourself, and I always want to err on a side of caution and make sure people don't make that mistake.
Exactly. You don't want to put your access key and secret key on the GitHub as well. So remember to check that always before you check in the code. So first, I mentioned about the AWS user. So AWS user is the user that you are logging. However, it didn't mention about which service that you can use. So you need to create a role called execution role. So in the AWS identity and access management page where you can create your SageMaker execution role so that when you put your role information here that you're able to run through the SageMaker resources with this role. So that you need to create two parts. One is the AWS user and another one is the SageMaker execution role. With these two information that you are good to go for the next step.
And I'll just butt in again and say these are things you could do inside SageMaker itself if you wanted to, but we're showing you how to set it up in Studio Lab remotely.
Exactly. So in this case, that I would assume you are on the way to creating the AWS user and also the SageMaker execution role. So the next step, I will share you what's the workflow that we are going to walk through. So when we want to create an endpoint on the SageMaker, these are the things that you need to create first, and then we can create an endpoint. So what are the things that you need to prepare? The first will be container. Which container you're going to use could be the Hugging Face one that I'm going to share you later, or depends on your use case. Could be TensorFlow, could be PyTorch, different framework that you're using. Check which framework you're using, which versioning, and what type of job that you're going to run through it. In our case, it will be the inference job. So you need to put an URL here to specify which image that you're going to use. If you use the model training within the SageMaker, you have the model artifacts. In our example, because we use the pre-trained model, so we actually not using this line. We only use the image with the pre-trained model and specify which model we are going to run through it with the model ID. Okay, with the model ID, then specify we are going to run through a single model endpoint. The second of all, after we create a container information, we need to create a model so that in the model, we say, hey, this model will be running on this container. using this SageMaker execution role, and we are going to create this model. And later on, we need to create an endpoint configuration so that I'm going to tell you, hey, endpoint that I want to have a serverless configuration for this endpoint setup. And then I actually create an endpoint. So everything here, you see create a model, that you actually create a model artifacts within the SageMaker. Until you run this line, create an endpoint. This is where you actually have the endpoint online. And then for the sample that we run through today, it will take you 2 minutes after you run this line and you see the endpoint online and available 2 minutes. That's really cool. So I will pause a bit here in case I just go too quick.
Yeah. Do you are you gonna run it, or did you already run it? Do you? As I know it's gonna take a couple of minutes.
Yes, I will run it when later on we go through the code blocks. So now I just want to share you the concept that what are the things that we're going to run through, and later on when I run through the code, that you will see what's going on. Okay, so if you have time, you can also click our SageMaker serverless endpoint page to go through the page and know more about how to run it under the hood and what are the features that you can use in it. So now I want to start with the Boto3 SageMaker client. And in this part, I have list line. So it's called SageMaker listed endpoints. I want to list out what are the endpoints that I actually already have and already deployed. And then so it's just a signal that I actually successfully log in my account. And the next part that I would like to have my model name and endpoint configuration name so that I can use it later in the script. So first, you already see I successfully connect to the SageMaker client. In this part, I specified the model data URL. And this part, you see a really long URL. You probably will think like where I can get this link. And for each of the link that you see here, it composed with the two components. First, till the Amazon AWS.com. This part is to share you in each of the region. In our demo case, it's in US East 1 region. For each of the region, we have a place to host this Docker images. So you have to find where you're located and to find this URL with this link that I put here. The second part is what are the information, which framework that I'm running. It's Hugging Face 1, PyTorch, and it's inference job. Which versioning that I'm running to, and what are the spec that I have. So in my case, will be Python 3.8, CPU, and Ubuntu in this environment. So that I will run through the cell to actually create a container so that I can create a model here. So until this step, you already create a model inside of the SageMaker. And I also put a small hint here. If you want to check if your model is created successfully, you can visiting the AWS console, SageMaker, and models. You can find your created model with the model name you have, and you can continue to run the notebook here. The next step, we are going to the most exciting one because we are going to bring up the configuration for the serverless endpoint. So for the serverless endpoint, what do we need to bring in? The memory size in MB and also max concurrency instances that we want to have. So I will also run through it. And until then, I will create an endpoint. And after I run this cell, it will take about 2 minutes to create an endpoint. So I will have a short pause here to wait for our endpoint creation.
Great. So while that's creating, maybe we can go through some of the high-level points while it's running.
Exactly.
Great. So again, just to reiterate, for the people who are brand new to SageMaker Studio Lab, and I pointed you to Amazon Machine Learning University, what you'll be doing in those courses is just building your own models. You'll be learning about different types of models. You'll be doing some experiments and training your own model, and you can live there for a long time just experimenting and learning. At some point, you're going to want to deploy that model. And by deploying it, it means, not just making sure the model works well, but now people are actually using that model to make good decisions based upon your machine learning work that you've done. And that's where this whole entire demo comes in, which is the model that you've been experimenting and playing with. You now want to take it and deploy it in SageMaker, in SageMaker itself, because they have no limits in terms of user sessions. They have no limits in terms of instance types. So you have a bigger world to explore there, but it is now part of the AWS services. You're outside of the experimental platform.
Yeah, thanks for the great summary. So from my side, I will switch to the AWS console with my SageMaker service here. So as you can see, I will need to refresh this page. And then now all the services that I created, the endpoint that I created is in service. So I will back to the notebook. So once you see the endpoint is in service, that means you can start to test with your samples here. So in our case, we can start to test our endpoint with SageMaker runtime, Boto3 client. And in this case, that we also have this runtime client and specify our content. Request the content will be in JSON format, and then our test data will be happy birthday to you, in case one of the audience are actually having a happy birthday date today. So I will run to this cell. It would go through the invoke the endpoint. It will take some time when you first code it, because it will take some code start time. And now we see the endpoint is running it and give us the response. So now we got the response say, hey, this is a positive sentence. And with this 99% is a positive sentence. So in this case, that from your side, you can replace with other sentence that you would like to test it out. And you can also test it out with several sentences within like a really short time to, try it out the serverless limitation that are just deployed. So this will be the end-to-end demo that I'm going to share in the end of this sample, that you can also clean up the environment, especially for the SageMaker model and SageMaker endpoint. So I will post here. So if any question that pops up, that we can take here.
Let's see, any particular questions that we typically get in this particular point?
Yeah. So I think for people who is first time using the SageMaker, probably like during this notebook, you will find some hints that I left here, say, hey, where to find the model? Hey, where's to find the endpoint? Because if you are first time is using it, that's back to the AWS console, that first you need to find out where's the SageMaker page. In my case, that I visit SageMaker page a lot, so it shows on my home page. But if you are just new to the AWS, you probably want to find out how to land this page. Mm-hmm. And then in your left-hand side, definitely you have a lot of things you can go through. And in our demo that we go through is the inference models, where I just created several models, and where I can find the endpoint. So these two places definitely are the place that you want to visit and check is available for both your endpoint and your model. So these are, like, I would say, for people who first time is running the AWS service, then this is the console, the portal, where to find what probably will take you some time to get it there. Okay.
Good job. No, and I know when we were reviewing some of the hackathon projects, the number one question most of them had, which is, I have this great model, it's working great, but now I want to deploy it so I can use it. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to review this particular demo, because you can take the model that you built in Studio Lab and then deploy it so you can have some other application reference it and use it.
Exactly. I want to plus one on that, because in my previous experience running hackathon, I always like to have a real endpoint when it comes to demo, because that's super powerful when you bring an endpoint to a final presentation. That means you actually train something that actually works and other people can use it.
Yeah.
So I would say it's definitely like super cool to have your model online and other people can use it. And with the serverless ones, you can have the most cost-effective one on the SageMaker.
So great. So why don't we go back, Mia, to the summary of the steps of what we just did, because there was a lot there, and it's pretty exciting. But why don't we just review again all the different steps that we did when you go to the top? I think you summarized it there.
Here?
Yeah, I think you had them way up high. Yeah, so step one, we just showed you the details of one Hugging Face model. They have over 15,000 models. She picked one, which is categorization, and showed you some details. Then two, we showed you how to set up your SageMaker environment from Studio Lab. So if you remember from the previous slide, Studio Lab sits outside of the AWS services, but we were able to connect to SageMaker with our AWS CLI and set up an environment getting ready to do a model deployment. Then step three, we connected to that. We actually did a connection, and we warned you, please don't leave your credentials in a notebook that you share. Step four, then we connected using Boto 3 to our SageMaker console, all from Lab. And then we created that endpoint. And then from that endpoint, we were able to point it to the model that we created in Studio Lab. Do I have that right, Mia?
Yeah, sure. So we have everything that create on Amazon SageMaker, and we actually working from the Studio Lab, which is outside of the SageMaker environment. So this gives you a chance to explore and use the SageMaker features, even though you are standing in the Studio Lab environment.
Yes. Now, your notebook has a lot of the heavy lifting done for people. Where can they go to access your particular notebook?
Yeah, and the notebook that we will share in the chat, which is our Studio Lab examples. And in that, you will find a folder called Connect to AWS, and you will find this notebook.
Great. And then you showed some demos after that, and of how you actually do it. Now, the cleanup part, can you walk us through? Because I know a lot of customers who use Studio Lab have concerns about leaving things running in SageMaker itself. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that cleanup?
Yeah, for the cleanup, you can both doing it by the code samples that we have. I can also share you where you can double check if you actually deleted it. So, for example, you can either run through the detail delete process via the code sample, or you can actually find one of the endpoints that you'd have here and have the action here and send it as delete. The same as for the model as well. So if after you run through run through your sample notebook, and then you still say, hey, I don't know if I actually deleted it, please come to this Amazon SageMaker console page and then to check if your models are there. So if you see your model still there somehow, and then you can still click here and delete the models. So in case that you, let's say you forgot your Drupal notebook, you close the session or so, any kind of reason, you can either go through the notebook, you can also delete your resources in this page. So you have two ways you can actually manage your resources and so on.
Perfect. I think that's a super important point. So
yeah. And another thing I would like to add on is, I know some of you might think of like, what if I really, really forget it? What would the worst things could happen? You can also set up your account limit for how much money that you can spend on this account. So this can be another an hour session to go through how to set up the cost limitation, but definitely you can find it in our documentation regarding, hey, I only want to spend $50 on this project, and I just say 50 in this account, and then you will stop it if you run to the $50 limit.
That's great. That's great to know. Well, great. So I think what we'll do now is we'll close out. Thank you, Mia, so much for that demo. I think that's very intense in terms of, or should I say advanced, of how to go from Studio Lab and deploying to SageMaker. We will open the floor now for questions.